So this is my breaker just went again. Hey Ty, it's the holidays. You've got kids. That means you had time to write a cold open, right?
No.
No. What are you doing with your time? Come on.
You've got FunFactor, two old gamers reviewing old video game magazine reviews. I'm Ty Shelter, he's Aidan Mohart, and we're two professional writers who grew up loving the video games and video game magazines in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s. Every episode we take a critical look back on the games media that, for better and for worse, inspired us to do what we do. First, go to funfactorpod.com and follow the show on your podcatcher of choice. Leave us a rating or review on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you check us out. We'll read the best, kindest, funniest, and most insightful ones on the air in our letters section. Please consider becoming a member of FunFactor Ultra, our premium tiers that unlock ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, and the swanky members-only channels of our Discord. So just go to funfactorpod.com. I promise you, you cannot miss it. Then help us spread the word. Shout us out on Blue Sky at funfactorpod.com and everywhere else at FunFactorPod. Aidan, waves of layoffs have rocked the game dev industry over the past couple of years, and the tech sector more broadly, and publishing and media even more broadly, digital media more specifically, and games media even more specifically. Folks, if you are listening to this podcast, you've had announced games you were looking forward to get canceled, studios you loved close, writers and creators you love leave the industry, and outlets you loved gutted. You might also yourself have been laid off or let go or lost work or lost opportunities because of all this. And, in one sense, there has been a post-forest fire spring. Small independent teams and small creator-owned publications like, this one, have sprung up to fill in the gaps between the big AAA tentpole releases and the handful of big corporate game sites left. But amidst all of this, we lose a little something that's harder to define, mentorship. Aidan, can you maybe convey to our readers what having editors in place for a long time at an outlet can do?
Yeah. I mean, my career as a writer goes back very far. And if, I would pinpoint 2007 when I opened my blog, A Dribble of Ink, as the start of that. Really a start of a career writing. I didn't make money off of that for many, many years until I kind of branched out into doing, professional work with outlets like Reactor, which used to be Tor.com, Barnes & Noble Science Fiction and Fantasy blog, and then into games journalism. I honed, a lot of my voice through my blog and learned how to write in my own voicey way. But there was also something that I could tell was sort of keeping me from being able to level up even further. And a lot of that was just ego. I was always a good writer in school. I was always, my dad's a writer. I was always praised for that, told I could write. And so I could, I had a great blog, did really well. I was doing it on my own. And I actually, by the end of that, kind of moved into more of an editorial role where I was acquiring a lot of pieces, reaching out, curating writers to come in and write for me, doing a lot of guest posts on specific topics. And so I was doing that editorial job from the other side. And that gave me that first inkling of oh, hey, wait, working with an editor isn't like an ego check. It's collaborative. And I started having conversations, and I remember one of them, one thing I was really well known for on A Dribble of Ink was cover art critiques. I'd scour databases, I'd find early covers before they had been officially announced, leak them, and then often have fun at the expense of the cover, sort of critiquing it. And one time I sat down with Brent Weeks, who is a science fiction and fantasy writer, I guess. And his books are great. I was having dinner with him down in Portland. And he was like, hey, man, I think I hadn't liked the cover for his recent book. And he was like, hey, I get what you're doing, but I think you have such a big platform. You could grow into something that's more reporting based. It's more journalistic than what other blogs are doing because you have access to so many people. When you're doing a cover, reach out to the people who made the cover. Don't hold your opinion back, but, place your opinion beside that of someone else.
Right,
who was
right, yeah.
involved in the process. And I was like, hey, that actually makes a lot of sense. And then Andrew Liptak did this fabulous history of the Expanse science fiction series, which
Hmm.
did a lot of reported interviews and, talked to a lot of people. It wasn't his same voicey, writing that he usually did from his perspective. And I kind of stopped and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, this can work in this space. What does that look like? And so I started seeing the way that other people's work and influence on me was changing my writing for the better. And that helped me understand collaboration. And so when I closed A Dribble of Ink, I kind of did short fiction for a number of years. And then as I started to expand outwards into journalism, a huge push for that was wanting to work with these writers and editors that I've admired for a long time. And so my big first feature for Kotaku was edited by Chris Kohler. And it was a behemoth. I didn't know what I was doing writing a big feature. It was 10,000 words. God bless Chris for working on that with me. But he made so many cuts that made it so much better. And that was a real eye-opening moment for me. I went, hey, working with somebody on this helped me. And there are bad editors out there who are, also egotistical, but I mean, it's 10 to 1, 100 to 1, in my experience of editors who are in there wanting to make the best piece possible. And so you kind of lose that when you get out and away from a really strong, not hierarchy, but a strong community of writers and editors who kind of allow experience to guide younger and newer people. And as we move forward into worker-owned sites, that's great. But you're also having a bunch of experienced writers edited by their equally experienced colleagues, and no room for new writers to break in. And that's something that I think we've really lost. And I watched, since I broke into games journalism 2019, I've watched the level of editing that I get on my pieces dwindle. Right. And so people like
Yes.
Jason Wilson, people like Chris Kohler were doing a lot of content edits, a lot of back and forth, working with me to find the best way to tell my story. And now I don't see a lot of that. And that's because editors, not that they're not good at it. It's not that I've gotten so good I don't need edited. It's that there's just not time and resources. And so they hire someone like me because I'm experienced and they know they can get a good first draft out of me. And there might be style guide updates, there's copy edits and all that, but rarely ever content updates at this point. And I think that for young writers, it's just really important to recognize that you're raw and that's a good thing. And you can learn from people who have been around forever and find the advice from them that makes sense for your writing and what doesn't. And just grow and meet people and have conversations, build relationships. And that's just disappearing, which is sad for me. It's, tough time to get into games writing.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, obviously I've not held a regular games writing gig, but I was in sports writing full time for quite a long time and still freelance quite heavily, and I have regular gigs, ongoing gigs. And coming up in Bleacher Report, it was the same thing where I had an independent blog that was all me, all the time, all my voice, all just my taste and what I thought. And same thing, I was the writer guy in school, or at least I thought of myself that way. And I had some experience. My mom was in advertising, and she's a great copy reader and proofreader and writer. So okay, great, cool. But working professionally was different. And some of my first couple freelance things were, whoa, hold on, I'm freelancing for newspapers. This is a whole different thing. And then, when I started working at Bleacher Report full time, part of it was they were going from totally Wild West blogging to, oh, we need to up our game. So they brought in some old magazine and newspaper editors to coach up their writers and got just a crash course on, okay, what is a lead? What is a nut graph? How do we write that? What is the voice of the site? Who is the audience we're trying to reach, right? Every piece can't just be, here's what I'm thinking,
Yeah.
writ large, even though that's cool, right? And there are reasons why we have the gamer column and reasons why we have the morning after column, right? There's these formats to follow, and it's because it's what the audience likes and expects. And sure enough, some of that was ripe for disruption, right? But having decades of experience and going, hey, some of the stuff that I got, casually someone mentioned once, I went, oh wow, and that's stuck in my head forever, right? And it's made me a better writer. And so, the thing with independent, like you said, Aidan, like, okay, you have a bunch of colleagues who are all roughly the same age, who often worked at the same outlet together, and have an idea of what they want their site to be, and literally their site, they own it, right? But then who's mentoring them? And sometimes you have people, and obviously no shade at all to the 25 to 31-year-olds doing this in a lot of cases, right? But like a lot of those people didn't have very many editors either, because the winnowing was already happening for editorial leadership. So if you've been writing about games more or less full time for the last 5, 6, 7 years, you've probably been doing it at sites where they haven't had one person or 2 or 3 or 4 people in charge for the site for years and years and decades on end. And we're transporting back to, as part of FunFactor, a time where editorial changes meant big changes, right? Who is the editor-in-chief? Who are the senior editors? When someone comes or goes or leaves or stays, the whole voice or look or the feel of the site can change. And, for the better or for the worse, an audience might grow, audience might shrink. And, I think this mirrors, right, game dev itself.
Yeah, big time. And I think there's something too about, the whole concept of this show, I suppose, is that we're at a place now where the first generation of people who only knew a world with video games and video game magazines, the kids that were reading GameFan or EGM or Game Players, Nintendo Power, are now the ones that are sort of like making those magazines and games. Only the games industry and the games media landscape is not built for adults with jobs and kids. And so you do see also, like, the flip side is people kind of burn out and reach their early 30s and say, oh, I can't do this anymore. I need something more sustainable. And so they're leaving games media, or they're leaving, the games industry, or they get laid off, and it's like, hey, maybe that's the wake up call I need. They go to get into PR, or they go into, a different industry or a different writing beat entirely if they can find it. And I think that there's that loss of sort of institutional knowledge that can happen as well. I at 42 years old, I'm sort of one of the old people in games media these days, right? Like, the editors I am working with are they'll mention that, like, oh, hey, I'm going to turn 29 in 3 days. And I'm like, 29? Yeah. Man, like, I could barely even, like, tie my shoes when I was 29. But, I think it's just like building communities requires all types. And it's not to say that, the people worker-owned sites like Aftermath don't produce amazing work. But I do think that, like, the best environments are going to have, like, I'm not getting into, like, the, like, both sides diverse, like, whatever nonsense that gets peddled at, like, centrist magazines, or how whatever CNN needs to be more diverse in their opinions. That's not what I'm talking about. But people who sort of, like, can work in tandem with others who have more experience, who have more, learning and knowledge that they can pass down. And frankly, like, the biggest mentor I've had as a games journalist has been you. I didn't know what a nut graph was. And you literally had to explain it. You used it in some feedback you gave me, and I was like, I don't know what a nut graph is. And then, or a kicker. I knew them conceptually, right? Just from reading and writing. And I was writing nut graphs and kickers and stuff. But, you've provided that level of, like, okay, you're a good writer, but now here's how sort of reporting works. Here's what an editor is really going to like. Here is what readers respond to. Here's how to structure this piece, in a way that maybe flows a little bit better. And so that's that rawness that, like, the rawness is what makes my writing, but there are just those ways of refining it and making it better. And finding somebody like you, because, like, the one constant throughout all of this is turning into, like, a love letter to Ty, but, like, you've been sort of that constant throughout, where I've been able to, like, have consistent ongoing feedback, and you've been there to see, the growth that I've made, responding to that growth. Because the fact of the matter is 9 out of the 10 editors I've ever worked with have been fired, laid off, or left the industry. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, nobody is around that I've worked with. I've been getting a bit of work for Retro Gamer, which is a paper magazine in the UK, which is fabulous and funny that FunFactor sort of came up at the time when I finally broken into some print magazine stuff. Um, and working with the editor there and being able to kind of grow our relationship has been really great and has led to, some pretty fun opportunities. But a lot of the time I write something, Wired, I was able to write 3 pieces and then the editor left and I've just never been able to crack them again. And, when you don't have, like, you can build relationships and they're great because it's good to have good friends. But the journalism industry has been relationship based forever, I think. And when the professional aspect of relationship building falls apart, you can sort of see how it then what are you supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
At that point, when I have to reintroduce myself, like I'm 7 years into this and I'm still having to write like, hey, my name's Aidan Moherd, like a Hugo winning journalist with work in Wired. Every time I pitch a story, because it's an editor I've never worked with, even if it's a place I've published before.
I was about to say, hey, I published 3 pieces for your website that you work for 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. Kotaku was putting out a call for freelance writers, and so I threw my hat in the ring, and it's like, hey, I'm Aidan. I've written for a bunch of places like Washington Post, Wired, and Kotaku way back in the day. And, it's like, but, still having to do that sort of dance because there's so little consistency is hard, let alone mentorship. It would be nice if editors knew who I was because they had been at a place long enough, between 2 pitches that I've sent to that outlet, let alone like mentorship over years. And like, I don't know what the future is. Nobody does, right? Like there's so much turmoil, but I do think there's going to be a premium on human content again. Probably before long. And that's where I think you're going to start getting really strong return to like some of those practices that really made work great up until all the layoffs started happening.
Yeah.
But, I also
ahead.
have to recognize that at this point I need to be a mentor, not a mentee, right? And it's funny to think about that my experience would place me in a position where it's like, oh, wait, I'm no longer looking for someone that I need to teach me. Now it's my turn to kind of pay it back. And so, I've always tried to, as much as I can, use my platform to help other people and be generous with my time, generous with advice and stuff, and just pay it forward as much as possible because there's been so many people who have taken that chance on me. And, I don't have a lot of influence in this space, but, I do have experience and being able to pass that along is, it feels good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, some of the experiences I had, right? Like some of the stuff we talked about, honing your craft, like Patrick Ruby at Vice years and years ago, the first big reported piece that I had to travel for, right? I actually drove to Chicago for a piece covering the Legends Football League, as it then was, in between being called the Lingerie Football League and the X League. But I went to go cover this. I'd been working on a reported story and talking to people, and there was all sorts of drama. I was getting unsolicited anonymous emails, tips, and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm working with my editor, and the PR person for the league emailed me to deny me a media credential at first, saying, oh, well, you're talking to the wrong people. You come in with these pre-known narratives, but unfortunately the truth is not always sexy. And I emailed my editor Patrick, and he was like, can you take a call? I'm like, yeah. And he gets on the phone, he's like, she just gave you your headline and either your lead or your kicker, oh my god, like she just handed it to you on a silver platter, and we start talking and everything, and it was great. But I being there and talking to these women and talking to these people and going through the I had so much stuff, and we talked about like 3,500 words, maybe a little bit upward growth, and my first draft was 12,000, and I flop sweated cutting down below 10,000.
Yeah.
And I sent it to him at like midnight 37, you know, and he woke up the next morning and just replied, ha 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 ha, ha, cut this in half. I'm like, okay. Right, you know, and like it's as much about what the audience will pay attention to, you know, and what he himself had bandwidth to edit or you know, whatever. But like it was just he knew how much story was there, and I realized that there's like 7 stories there, right? That I could cover this league full time and write real human stories that connect with people, just like I could cover any other sports league, right?
Yeah.
But like you just can't do that all at once.
But
And
I
yeah,
think like also there's such a like distinct difference between being a freelancer or being like a salaried or like permalancer, because like
yes,
for me, I'm not guaranteed to be able to tell all 7 of those stories, you know?
right,
So like if
right,
that's good stuff, if that's enough to like carry a story, but I have no guarantees of like selling a follow-up to that same publication,
yeah,
that is tough. I like to cram all of that stuff in there because I find it all fascinating.
yeah,
But absolutely a good editor is going to say, hey, like this is cool, but like it's often its own little like section, you know,
yeah,
it's its own thing. It's its own narrative that the main narrative doesn't need. You know, if they were like, hey, could you, you know, spin this into like a 800 word op-ed or whatever, great, cool.
yeah,
But that's just for freelance. It also doesn't work that way. So it's like if you're cutting stuff, if you're cutting that down to 5,000 words, that's like 5,000 words of good narrative that nobody will ever see, which is also just
yeah,
like it's just that's a tricky thing for me to always
yeah.
balance. But
And Bleacher Report, the big problem they had, because they started by just going, hey, anybody can write for our site. You just get an email address, you start logging in, you start writing, and they just sold advertising against a bunch of whatever content, right? And it grew and grew. And then they went, oh, hey, you know, they did some editing to like clean up some stuff and cull bad stuff or whatever. But as I came on, I was part of a thing of, no, wait, we need to hire people with some amount of track record who are professionals and bring them on. And then we also need to coach up some people. So they actually developed a really robust in-house like writer mentorship program and like feedback coaches. So there's the copy editors and stuff, but then there are also like developmental editors that would pick selections and of pieces and go, hey, like let's, you know, talk. Kay Jennings, who writes novels, she's sort of the Stephen King of Portland, Oregon. She writes a lot of like Pacific Northwest based cozy mysteries. Kay's wonderful. She gave me a ton of awesome feedback. King Kaufman of like Salon and either Salon or Slate. But he did a bunch of mentor stuff, and I've talked before. He actually did this little video about explaining leads and being like, "Hey, when you start a piece, you have about the length of time. Like, pretend somebody's getting on a bus, and you've got just enough time to run up and tell them your lead, right?" And he's like, "The best lead I ever heard in my life was I was in 8th grade, and somebody shot Pope John Paul II. I think this is 82 or 83. So this is Aging King. But so like a girl in his class ran up as he was getting on the bus to go home and went, somebody shot the Pope. And he's like, whoa,
yeah,
what? Somebody shot the Pope, right? You know, and he's like, okay, now like here's what inexperienced writers like often do. And like they went and filmed him getting on a bus, right? And they just had like an intern do this. And so like they first reenacted somebody shot the Pope. And then he's getting on the bus and she like runs up and he turns to look at her and she goes, the history of papal assassinations is both long and interesting. In 1372, and he's like, okay, and he like gets on the bus and the bus drives away, right? And I'm like, oh wow, like what an incredible way to demonstrate that, right? And that's because Bleacher Report, as an organization, as an outlet, when we have to put time and money into mentorship. And like, yeah, Andrew says in the chat, that's a good bit. Like, absolutely. And it's like, wow, like what an instant crystallization, right? So I will think about that till I die when I write the first sentence of a piece.
Also so focused though on like online writing, where there's a million infinite number of options of what somebody could be doing.
True.
One of like I talk about the oneup.com days a lot because they were so influential on me. One of my favorite writers at that time was Sean Elliott, who would write a review and he'd have an 800-word review and he'd like open it up. He'd open the review with 350 words about like, I don't know, some like kid who crapped his pants at school
Yeah.
when he was a kid or whatever, or how he fed some kid X-Lax at school or whatever, right? And he'd spend 350 words on this, and he'd be like, what? Like, what? And then, but then he'd like tie it all together in the final 450 words into this like really eloquent, in a crude way, review of whatever game, like, you know, Company of Heroes that he was working on. And I always kind of admired his ability to like do the opposite of what you're describing here, which is like lead someone in with like, what? I thought I was reading a review of Company of Heroes. Why is this about a kid crapping his pants? And that sort of writing has always appealed to me, but I think that Sean was sort of an outlier, or maybe just one up being so far ahead of their time. He was sort of taking a style that works maybe better in print media, because somebody's already bought that magazine, right? They're committed to buying it. They've already paid for that writing, so it doesn't even matter really if they read it. You know, they're not. It's not going to make more money for anybody if they spend more time looking at that page. And so you could maybe have more diverse structure of the way that people approach something like, you know, features or op-eds or interviews or previews, rather than all this like news beat based stuff. Like if you're writing about the Lions game last night, like you have 6 hours to capture that audience, right?
Right. Yep.
Whereas like magazines, obviously we're running on monthly timelines. And so you wrote news differently, you wrote previews differently, and maybe there was a bit more leeway in how you approach storytelling, which I think is also really interesting. And I think like in some ways I'm wired to have written for old video game magazines more than, you know, 2025 era websites. But, you know, working with editors is the way that you figure that out. And sometimes you do have to like put your ego aside and say, hey, this isn't the way I want to read it, but like this is the way this website presents stories and writes stories. And so I can be really good at writing stories that way too if I need to be.
Yeah, well, if this were just a writing podcast and not also a reading and reviewing podcast, we could go in a little bit about how my column for Pride of Detroit Direct did actually lead with a anecdote about my youngest and micro and macroeconomics, and how football is both simple and complex like economics. But we have GameFan's 1997 December issue to discuss, and their review of Quake to discuss and review as well. If you aren't already a member of FunFactor Ultra, if you aren't listening to this live as we record it on stream for our FunFactor review crew members, well, you know, sit tight, hang on through the break, listen to some ads and Millennium Falck's incredible original music right here on FunFactor. Welcome back to Fun Factor, where two old gamers review old video game magazine reviews. Of course, we want you to review us. Do we get a full 5.0 in Fun Factor? Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever. We will read the best, funniest, kindest, and most entertaining ones on the air. Aidan, I want to ask, what's the deal with GameFan? But of course, you know, we have discussed GameFan before. We've done GameFan before. And if you are not a review crew member, you've missed out on the bonus episode, our interview with Molly Patterson, who was heavily involved in editorial content creation, etc., throughout the run of GameFan and then to EGM. Definitely go back and listen to that. I think there is a you know, preview teaser on the main feed, and you can get some of the good conversation that we have. But this one, December 1997, 142 pages of editorial content, plus all the GameFanish ads in the back. Again, if you don't know, GameFan started out as a one video game retail stores sort of newsletter / catalog and grew into its whole own magazine, but they kept a bunch of the ads in the back. Number of games reviewed and systems reviewed for. Honestly, I didn't go bother count, because in classic GameFan style, the previews and reviews and even a secret third thing that I don't think has ever been formally done in any other magazine that we've reviewed or that I've come across is present in this. So, you know, hey, it's 1997, it's a console mag, it's the consoles, it's PlayStation, it's Saturn, it's N64, that's pretty much it. The masthead is actually the thing that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about. Both less time talking on the masthead itself and more talking about the change in the masthead that came with this issue. So we have the ed zone here, right? And what we have is two letters to the editor. We have two letters to the editor. Aidan, I put in the script here the kind of the key part of the first letter to the editor. If you want to read that for me.
Sure.
Can I go full screen? Yeah, hold on.
So this letter from the editor is from Dave Halverson, who is infamous, I suppose, in the gaming space. And Dave Halverson says, quote, "Since 1992, when I founded GameFan magazine, I have acted as the magazine's editor-in-chief. It has been my pleasure to assemble and work with what I feel is the finest staff in video game publishing today. Not only those who remain, but those who have passed through in my time have my deepest gratitude. Of the original team, few remain, as many of GameFan's original members have gone on to successful ventures throughout the industry. And now I, too, have reached a point in the evolution of my publishing career where I feel the need to move on as well."
So yeah, this issue marks the transition from Dave Halverson to David S.J. Hodgson, who I believe mostly then went by David J. Hodgson going forward. And Aidan, I don't know are you comfortable? Okay, hold on. No, it's both David Hodgson and David S.J. Hodgson. Okay, all right. Anyway, Dave, are you comfortable explaining this a little bit? Because I did not read GameFan much at all, and I was not paying attention when whatever was controversial about Dave Halverson happened, or over the many times that but you've alluded to this before in the past, that this is an issue. So I'm just wondering, are you comfortable talking more about what is the deal with Dave Halverson?
I mean, I feel like we should have a Dave Halverson bonus episode, with Dave, or with people who've worked from him. But he was an influential games journalist and editor who started GameFan, who just has a reputation of being very controversial, very polarizing. He had an incredible mullet, I think, from what I understand. And I think a lot of that is just sort of encompassing. I don't know what he was like to work with on a day-to-day basis, but I do know that, he just had, he was always just pushing that personality-based games journalism in a way that I think encompasses what is maybe wrong with current games journalism, or not games journalism, but games culture. Just sort of that anti-authoritarianism or anti. I don't even know. I don't know. It's too hard to explain. But we should do some more research. He was just kind of bombastic and aggressive and sort of caustic in a way that I think made him hard to work with. Probably made his stuff interesting and energetic, but also maybe undermined the work that other people were doing around him.
Interesting. Okay, so he says here he's going to stay on as creative director, but otherwise we'll let David Hodgson take over. They also, this dual sort of letters from the editor, here's the old one, here's the new one. They also talk about their editorial alter egos and how those will continue to play a role, which I think is really interesting, right? That you're doing this, it's not even really kayfabe, but as GameFan, it's kind of like, okay, well, you'll still see this character who I write and voice in the magazine appear in the magazine, and that will be me. However, right? This is just such to me, it's such an interesting artifact of this magazine in particular and the scene in general at the time.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And there's also this transitional period for the magazine where you're also, you're seeing GameFan being such a ragtag organization that wasn't founded on strong business practice, right? And that stuff is hard. People aren't just naturally good at that sort of thing. In chat, Greg says, when Ryan Lockhart started working for EGM, he used to tell us stories about how the GameFan editors would befriend the guy with the fastest car because the first people to the bank on payday were the only ones who would be able to cash their paychecks. And so that was sort of the professional environment that they were working in. And I think a lot of that came down to sort of just the challenges of running a small business that maybe you don't have experience in the background. And, enthusiasm can only take you so far. At a point, you need to learn how to actually run the business that you're running.
Yeah, and there is a type of guy where you run your small business, and hey, you running the small business is the important part. Things like employees getting paid is not the important part, no matter how much money you're getting or how many employees you have. And there are other people that, would rather, whatever, will take care of their employees no matter what. They'll starve themselves before they let somebody miss a paycheck. So it's just, it is kind of reflective of the sort of fly by night type thing. And of course, hold on one second. Dave Halverson went on to found Gamers Republic and Play. So Dave Halverson continued to not only edit this magazine, but continued to edit other magazines and other outlets in the industry. And this maybe why is this is maybe why I'm not as familiar with Dave Halverson, because I wasn't reading GameFan regularly while he was in charge of GameFan, and making this thing his own, perhaps above and beyond anything else as far as the magazine's concerned. And like you said, I would love to know more about how it became clear to him that he's reached a point in the evolution of his career that he needs to move on as well. Because that decision can be come to from all sorts of ways, all sorts of reasons, just like anybody in any industry.
So, as you've been talking, I've been doing a little bit of research to try to get to the bottom of some of this. And Shidoshi, who worked on GameFan, there's a history of GameFan on Hardcore Gaming 101. And they wrote a letter here. Let me get to this. So this was a letter they wrote to Dave. They have said they in the history they say they've cooled on Halverson a bit. But this is a quote from the letter they wrote initially back in the day. So, quote, "You are such a great example of this situation where someone idolizes someone, meets them in person, and then finds out how much of an asshole they are. If all the people in here who say so many good things about you actually met you, their tune would be different afterwards. I know, because I was exactly like them before I met you. I pray that one day you'll realize what kind of person you are, that you'll stop caring about only yourself, that you'll realize how much you have dicked over so many people for your own gains, how much you have lied and deceived people to help boost your rock star lifestyle, and that you'll really open your eyes and be a decent person. I have every belief that you indeed could be a really great guy, even after all the crap you put on me. Even after all the crap you put me and so many others who have worked for you through." And that was 10% of this letter. So
damn.
Yeah. We can drop that in chat or in the show notes as well. But the Hardcore Gaming 101 has a lot of firsthand experiences with Halverson and how hard and difficult he was to work with. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that pretty much nails it. Based on when you as I was just saying, I've worked with some fly by night people, in meat space, in business, online, etc. And sometimes there's hey, I'm the swashbuckling guy who's the guy, and this is me, and I am this business, and da da da. And yeah, sometimes people get pushed to the side, and sometimes the contributions are assumed rather than recognized.
I heard
the
sorry, Shidoshi is Molly Patterson, who we've had on the show as well.
Okay.
So we have that, strong connection. This is somebody that, I have immense respect for as well. Writing about her experiences with Dave. So in any case, what's the deal with Dave Halverson? That's an entire bonus episode of FunFactor, I think. Maybe where we dig into some more of people's actual experiences and maybe did Dave change? Who knows? But what did lead to his sort of exodus as the leader of GameFan? I don't know the answer to that.
All right, one thing that I know, it is way past time for the flip through. All right, Aidan, I actually have jumped ahead already for your benefit. Page 16 and 17, and actually, I believe a couple more pages. We have an interview with Bruce Campbell.
Okay.
That Bruce Campbell.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So this month, Activision invited GameFan down to their new headquarters to shoot the breeze with actor and cult icon Bruce Campbell, star of the Evil Dead trilogy, because he was the voice for Pitfall Harry in their 3D remake of Pitfall, or 3D whatever, their new Pitfall game, Pitfall 3D. And I tried to clip out a piece of this for you, but I like every single thing I wanted to clip because there's so much good Bruce Campbell stuff, right? Let me see. I thought I did actually get a piece into the script.
There's a fabulous pull quote right in here, in the middle of the first page, and it's just, quote, "I never watch horror movies. You know, I think most of them are really stupid."
Yeah.
Which, like, is also, like, inherent. Not that all horror movies are stupid, but, like, there is absolutely, like, sort of that style of horror movie that incorporates absurdity as part of its whole shtick. Which I think maybe he's underselling, but I'm also not a big horror movie fan. I wouldn't call them stupid, though. But I'm not Bruce Campbell, so who knows?
Yeah. No, Bruce Campbell is very funny. Unfortunately, he came to do a talk when I was in college, and I showed up, but so many people showed up so far ahead of time that we were like 80 people short of even making the door. Like, they packed the whole hall of seats, and then they packed it standing room only, and then we were still like 80 people from actually getting in the building. Yeah, but I did hear from someone who did make it in that the pull quote was kind of, someone was like, "Hey, have you?" Well, it's not even a pull quote really, but the memorable moment was someone was like, "Hey, you've been like a lead in all these like small movies. Have you ever tried being like in big movies?" And Bruce Campbell was just like, "Yeah, of course. Like, what are you kidding?" No, I just like really love being in shitty little movies.
No, he's watches.
Like what?
Yeah, he's just post Harry Potter Daniel Radcliffe, who just does like the weirdest, funniest, strangest movies he can find, because
he just does that without the like tens of millions,
without the $30 million in his bank to like bankroll
exactly.
It. Yeah. Right.
Exactly. And this is, and as you see here, I mean, they put every little bit they got from Bruce Campbell into this interview, which of course you would. They put it all on the text. Classic GameFan style. Yeah. This is tiny text, man. They put the whole thing in there. This is a big meaty interview.
Yeah, this isn't like editorialized. It's like they've got it all in there. Speaking of cuts.
Right. Yeah.
Like, absolutely. If you saw this on a website right now, it would be like an 800 word mini interview, right?
Yes. Yes.
Where like half of it's editorialized, which I like. I write those. It like, I'm not. That's not a dig on anybody, but times have changed.
Yeah, they have. I'm gonna zip ahead a little bit to the viewpoint, the reviews section, and again, classic GameFan style. We have capsule reviews here. 3 quick rundowns. Basically a big paragraph from 3 different reviewers, plus 5 mini scores added up to a total score. And you know, there's some really interesting ones here. And as we've noted before, GameFan is using the whole scale in a way that most reviewers then and now did not, right? You know, so you can see here, just in this one page, we've got 5 games. We've got Armored Core gets 92, 89, 92. Bug Riders gets 42, 55, 52. Right? But then here, Critical Depth for PlayStation, I don't even remember this one. It's 70, 88, and 73, which feels like a big spread for 3 different reviewers from the same magazine.
That was like a submarine game? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember that.
And so you'll see here, for me, a 65 and a 77 are like two completely different classes of game, but Fighting Force gets a 65, 70, 77. And snuck in the middle here. One.
Yeah, game of the month.
The game of the month. And it's the game of the month. And it's got the same treatment as everybody else. 96, 98, 97.
I'm going to need like somebody to walk me through the differences between a 96, a 97, and a 98.
Yeah.
100-point scale is wild.
Spawn, which this game was panned hard by everybody. But it got a 78, a 60, and a 79. Which is like, okay, the 60 is more in line with what I remember.
Even 60 seems high from my memory of the reception to that game. I haven't played it, but
yeah. And of course, and then just flip the page. Tomb Raider 2. Here we are. We're like 15 reviews into this. Our 16th review is Tomb Raider 2, 98, 94, 96. Thrown in there with Automobile, Lamborghini, San Francisco Rush, which actually has a big feature later in the issue. Aidan, I swear to God, this podcast, I'm going to be calling issues episodes and episodes issues till I die.
Yeah.
I
get used to
I'm
it, listeners.
Oh, Lord. And the one I really wanted to point out here is Quake for Saturn. We have 3 paragraphs here, 92, 90, 93. And we're going to review the actual 2-page spread editorial review that will be later in the magazine. But hey, why not give 3 different reviewers 3 different bites at the apple? I find this so appealing.
The like mixture of like full length, like feature review and capsule reviews. I love it too. I think it's great.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, capsule reviews and like feature reviews serve totally different purposes. And so I like the fact that we get both of them. I think capsule reviews are great as little buyer's guides. Tell people what the game is, if they are going to like it, like, should they spend their money on it? And I find that feature reviews are better at being like, hey, what is this game? What's interesting about it? Where did it maybe fail against its ambitions? And so like you usually wouldn't get both. And so I like the fact that they give both, even for like the big games, instead of just giving the big games feature reviews and capsule reviews for sort of the smaller releases. Everything gets at least capsule reviews and then, feature reviews for the big ones.
Yeah. And Craig Stewart in chat goes, look at those font sizes. I've tried to blow this up big enough that you can read on stream, but it really doesn't look like you can. So for just the Quake, this is okay. Here we go. I'll read. I believe this is Halverson's review. I could spend this viewpoint telling you all about the extra lighting effects, startlingly precise control, and all-around marvel that Lobotomy created. I could chat about the scary musical score that outperforms any N64 Hammond organ warblings out there. I could banter up, which, by the way, my grandpa taking strays. He was a jazz and polka organist and had a Hammond organ that I used to poke around with as a kid. Damn, oof. I could banter on about the hidden comic, Mundo Cool Daddy-O, the 4 Lobotomy levels, and the fact that this is all running on a machine which most folk imagine can only handle 2D. But I won't. I'll offer a quick 2 thumbs way up for the maniacal Marines up at Lobotomy HQ, and then quickly rant about the ineptitude of Sega of America to not allow NetLink compatibility. Hello? Hambleton to SOA. Engage brain, please. Of course you don't want to make the best multiplayer game on the planet NetLink compatible. Yes, good move. I like it. And Lobotomy already had the NetLink version up and running, but you still canceled? Bravo. Bracket sobs, bracket 93. And again, I want to underscore, this is one of 3 capsule reviews for Quake on a page that contained 3 capsule reviews each for 6 different games. 6 different games, right? So that means there's 18 capsule reviews on this one page. And that covered a lot of ground.
It's pretty impressive. I mean, it is dense. It is not readable, but there's a lot there. And I mean, like, that review you just read out too, like, fits in a lot of voice also, which can be challenging in a small space like that. But some of these capsule reviews are probably like, I don't know, 200 words, 150 words. Like, they're pretty long.
Yeah. there are full page reviews that only get 200-300 reviews
Yeah.
in most magazines,
Yeah.
right? Because they have screenshots and font sizes bigger than 4 or 6 points. Oh my lord. Greg immediately says small spaces get less challenging when you reduce the font size to add 50 more words for sure. And like this doesn't change. They've got a big old Duke Nukem special. I'm just gonna flip through, but again, this is a super dense strategy guide. Every item in the game, every weapon in the game, all this stuff, absolutely dense. And Molly talked about this in the bonus episode, right? Where you go, look, I'm so passionate about this. I want to get all of the information to these people, right? Like, here are the readers. They want the information. They're buying the magazine to get this information. I am going to give it to them. Is it readable? Maybe not. Is it attractive? Absolutely not. But like, I'm gonna get it in there, and it just speaks to the passion that
I guess
GameFan had.
I mean, maybe that's why I'm doing a podcast with you 30 years later, but like that was an upsell for me. Like I was not daunted by small text and bloated features. Like I love that. Give me everything. Give me every word of that interview. Like, and when we talk about how we've been influenced by our time with these magazines, like that probably is a big part of the why, writing online for my own blog was appealing, because I did that big expansive writing where everything just sort of spilled out because I didn't have that editor telling me, like fit it into this box. As I've been writing for magazines for like Retro Gamer, it's been like a nice challenge being told, hey, you need to write this sidebar and it can only be 150 words. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is like, now I got to write like a tweet instead of like, 4 paragraphs or whatever. But okay. I don't know. Like you say, like people say, like, editors now are like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. But like, I don't know. This stuff breaks so many of the rules that I've learned over the years, but I love it.
Okay, Aidan, sorry about that. I am back. And I wanted to flip through. We had a couple of ads that I found interesting right between that and this that I had highlighted already. Now get ready for the most anticipated special move in fighting game history. Street Fighter in 3D. Street Fighter EX plus Alpha. So it's Street Fighter in 3D. Yeah,
I was never a fighting game. Like I would play Street Fighter 2 with my friends a lot, but I was never very good at them. And so I always, when this was announced and started being shown off through ads like this, I was like, okay, Street Fighter EX plus Alpha is going to be my game. I'm going to buy it and I'm going to become good at Street Fighter EX plus Alpha. I did not buy it or become good at it, but I was like determined that this was going to be the game that I was like good at. But turns out I'm just not.
Wow.
I'm just not a fighting game guy. My brain doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no. And of all the ones, your hobby horse of like,
I know.
Hey, Street Fighter 2, incredible in 2D.
I know.
Why do we need to make it in 3D?
Yeah.
And
right?
where it looks objectively much worse.
Yeah.
But also, we have this thing here. Now, Aidan,
this is a beautiful preview.
This is a beautiful preview. I'm gonna, and I've said it before, I've said it online, we've talked about this, Quest 64, which there's a great Blue Sky account that makes Quest 64 literally
my favorite Blue Sky account. Yeah.
It's incredible. It's great. But it's got, so this thing here, P for preview. Here's why I didn't go and count all of the reviews, because they're all put together and they all look pretty similar. Some are marked P for preview. Some are marked R for review. And then also there's the secret third thing, right? So Quest 64, this was the cover story? Quest 64? And we are back here. There's so much. Could 98's hottest action RPG have THQ's name on it? Summon magic at spectacular creatures. There's no doubt that like some of this stuff was like way up there in terms of what the N64 could do at the time, but there's also a lot of stuff that, I'm sorry, our hero here, our Quest 64 boy,
Brian,
is extremely torquey. Some of this stuff is brilliant, some of this stuff is terrible, some of it is great, some of it is laughable. some of it is totally anonymous, Zelda-like. Others of it is like, wow, they were really on one with this. I'm stunning polygon environs to gasp at, and I'm like, I struggle to believe that the GameFan folks even were gasping at these polygon environs in 1997.
No, except that people liked 3D graphics for some reason. Quest 64 is not a game. I liken Quest 64 to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I think, like, if you had released Pokemon Scarlet and Violet on the Nintendo 64 and it looked like it does now, people would be impressed. So I think Quest 64 was probably impressive back then. Not a game I played at the time for reasons that are probably obvious to most people who listen to this podcast. It is one that I keep wanting to go back to, though. Probably because I love the Quest 64 official, like, Blue Sky account, like daily Quest 64, like, posts are incredible, but it is also one that I'm so curious about. One of the interesting things is that it went on to get a European version, a Japanese version, which had a lot of, like, changes and improvements, and apparently the Japanese version is much better than the American version, you know, considering what it is. But
interesting.
But yeah, I mean, like, in a post Final Fantasy VII world, I think Quest 64 was, like, it was a hard follow-up, right? To something like Final Fantasy VII, where RPGs were going. It was fine for what it was, right? Like, if it was a reimagining of, like, you know, action RPGs on the Super Nintendo, and Final Fantasy VII hadn't, like, completely rearranged the RPGs ecosystem, you know, maybe it would have been more fun. But I mean,
I just look at this because this is the most N64 thing of all time, right?
Yeah.
Because Nintendo ended up rebalancing the hardware for texture maps versus polygons, and so we get these rose bushes that are clearly just hexagonal bumpers that then have rose garden textures on them, and this just looks like hedges have the measles. This is terrible.
Yeah, okay. Obviously that looks bad, and I can't believe I'm defending, like, bad 3D graphics, but keeping in mind these also look at this point like there may be direct feed screenshots versus, like, photographs off CRTs, and I do think effects like that did benefit from being played on consumer CRTs with, like, low TVL, like, line counts. That helped blur a lot of that together, and obviously the Nintendo 64 was blurry, period, but, you know, system appropriate or like era appropriate hardware helped a lot.
Yeah. And also,
what is happening? Why? What have you done to me? Why am I defending Quest 64?
I don't know.
It's because of the blue sky.
This enemy design is cool, right? Like, these roses that come and attack you, and, like, that looks cool. You got shines on the eyes and stuff. You know, that's cool. But again, here's our protagonist, who, you know, if anything,
his name is
protagonist Brian.
I think, definitely. Okay. Like, all right, you know, recovers some of his coolness, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Okay, well, that was our cover story.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And then, of course, you turn it's like, here's Resident Evil 2, and this whole thing is bathed in blood.
Yeah.
But, like, when you're seeing some of the stuff that PlayStation is pulling off at this time, and, like, of course, a bunch of this is assets and graphics laid on top of the actual screenshots, right? But, like, damn, like, PlayStation was doing some unbelievable stuff here.
Please go back to the first page of the Resident Evil 2 preview, because, like, look at this text layout. It's amazing. It's like a big T shape kind of cut out around a bunch of screenshots, but it, like, reads right into the seam, the fold. So you're probably having to, like, smash that flat just to be able to read it.
In real life, you are probably not able to read
like
2 or 3
the last
letters
word of
in either direction. Absolutely.
But then it's also, like, the text on the left page is right aligned against the, like, seam, and then the text on the right page is left aligned. So it's like, it also looks like it reads straight across as one huge long
it does. That's so funny.
But yeah, incredible stuff. I love this era. And, like, when I say I love this era, like, genuinely I love this. I love how unique GameFan's layouts were. I love how they tried new things even when it didn't work. And that level of enthusiasm is just so appealing to me.
Absolutely. There was, of course, there's a big Tomb Raider 2 feature. Again, we're talking about the sequels, right? We're now at this point in the PlayStation's life cycle.
Yeah.
All the big 2s to all the big 1s are coming out. They look great. Duke Nukem 3D, also a preview. Fighting Force is an R, a review. Command and Conquer Red Alert, a review. I wanted to quickly get to, shoot, I forgot which page, where we have a special third thing. And then before I review, there's one more thing I wanted to look at. All right. So, Aidan, we've got Final Fantasy Tactics preview. Again, this is amazing. There's a big so swing. Good. Unfortunately, it's a P, not an R, or we would be reviewing the review. Insane Meteo spell. Like, yo, the whole map lights on fire. And again, we have the passion of the people who know what this series means, what this could mean. So much of the screen texted here. It's great. We even we overlaid the graphic over the little the score bug here.
Really cool.
Very nice touch. Very nice. Yeah,
and the little pull quote is better than Final Fantasy VII, and the answer is yes.
Yes, that's correct. The correct answer. And I'm sorry once again. This is me forgetting to know. Oh, here it is. We also have U.
Whoa.
A U for update.
Death Trap.
Okay, so
why do we keep talking about Death Trap Dungeon?
I don't know.
This is like the fourth episode we've talked about Death Trap.
I know. Dungeon. It's literally the fourth episode in a row we're talking about Death Trap Dungeon because this is an update, which is a re-preview, basically, I think. And this is great. I usually approach an update with two goals in mind: discuss recent changes or improvements to the gameplay, and explore possible future additions. Naturally, we also strive to bring you the best shots with all the latest eye candy. No, we have like an ogre or gnome flashing his butt at us.
It's like a goat.
Thank you for the best shots in eye candy, GameFan. With these theories in mind, I present to you Eidos's Death Trap Dungeon, a game in desperate need of help. I've tried my best to find solid, enjoyable gameplay in this latest version, and I've failed. And the cool shots you see on this page, a miracle. I pray that Eidos has some kind of emergency plan for DD, because its scheduled December release seems impossible at this point. So this is going out in this is going out in the December 1997 issue of this magazine as an update, not a review. Which you would think it would be, this would be a review copy so that it can go in the December issue for a game with a December release, right?
You would think so. But
and instead, like they sent, this is an early, like what build did they send? Were game magazines regularly getting, hey, here's a playable pre-release build to write a preview about? Before they get a review?
Well, by the time the disc-based systems came around, they were probably getting like pre-release builds. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you know what this reads as? This reads as like, hey, our next cover is Death Trap Dungeon.
Yeah.
So we're not going to slam it in an official review yet because we're hoping that maybe next issue you'll be excited. That's weird. Like, follow-up previews were normal for games, so like to call this an update is kind of funny, but yeah, it kind of slots in between. It reads almost like a review that doesn't want to officially be acknowledged as a review.
Yeah, that's so that was just interesting. There's one other thing I wanted to look at. It was other stuff, which is 146.
Before we get to page 146, can we go to page 128? There's a preview of next page over there. It's the preview of Panzer Dragoon Saga, which is cool. 2-page preview of Panzer
there we
Dragoon
go.
Saga.
Oh yeah.
Just beautiful screenshots. Like it's lovely to see this game get such a strong write-up from a magazine like GameFan. Famously, of course, Panzer Dragoon Saga got I think 12,000 copies printed in English in North America, so it's very rare. It's very expensive now, it's a really, really interesting game. I finally played through it. Well, I haven't actually even finished it. I'm near the end. But been playing through it on
Nice.
my Saturn after
Nice.
I got all that set up, and it's really interesting. It's like, it's not the type of RPG that typically I am looking for, especially compared to other games at that time. But what it does is so compelling and unique, and like, it's an experience unlike anything that I've played before or since. And the merging of sort of Panzer Dragoon's 3D dragon flight mechanics with more traditional RPG mechanics is really cool. And I wish more people had a chance to play it. And I wish there had been, I wish its publisher, Sega, had given it as much confidence as GameFan here, where they did a big, huge 2-page spread with a lot of beautiful graphics and
beautiful art,
screenshots and stuff.
The screenshot, now this looks really well formatted, really well laid out. I like it a lot. Also, shout out to our friends at Retrograde Amnesia, who did a really good playthrough series for Panzer Dragoon Saga. Excellent. Had a lot of really cool insights into the development and everything. And I love the there's one little bit they talk about at the beginning where our main character, like a dragon rider, is like dying, and it's basically, oh, you've got to take this to this place. My dragon knows the way. And with like one line of dialogue sets up the whole idea. Oh, here's why it's on rails, right? Here's why it's a rails shooter, because my dragon knows the dragon will fly you there, So super, super, super cool. But I wanted to get to other stuff. This was actually a growing section. We've seen several other magazines attempt something like this, which is like sort of a rumor, we were printing rumors, right? We did this with the Next Gen issue, where they talked about, here are all of the Ultra 64 rumors all in one spot, and some of them were very clearly the publisher told us this directly and told us we could print it as news, and we're calling it a rumor. And some of it was like, we are making this up, and other stuff was in between. So Aidan, if you want to go in the script here, I cut out, or I thought I did. Hang on. Okay, I copied it. I thought I did. Can you see the Final Fantasy VIII finished, done that is section? Okay, great. Let me blow it up just a little bit bigger.
So kicking off this edition of Other Stuff is a rumor called Final Fantasy VIII Finished? Done, that is. And it reads, yes, according to reliable sources at Square Los Angeles, the team responsible for Final Fantasy VII is in the stages of putting the finishing touches on Final Fantasy VIII in Hawaii. Oddly enough, it appears that it has been done for more than 4 months and is now undergoing bug testing and translation of the text in the US version. The only question now is, when will the game be released? My best guess would be summer 1998, and expect Square to drop this bomb on Enix as they unveil Dragon Quest to a frothing public. Most importantly, it would seem that Square is shooting for a simultaneous launch in the US and Japan, though I'll believe that when I see it. Last, but certainly not least, the same sources also state that Final Fantasy IX is already undergoing preliminary design. The big question, of course, being, for PlayStation or PlayStation 2? If I had a basket and some eggs, they'd all be on PlayStation 2.
Wow. Lots to unpack here, right?
Yeah.
Which, of course, Final Fantasy VIII was well in development by the time Final Fantasy VII was released, especially here in the US, right? It's been done for more than 4 months and is now undergoing bug testing and translation for the US version. Seems ludicrous to me in December 1997. And of course, I don't know exactly when the deadline is. Probably would have been October or November, right? And Andrew says in chat, summer 1998 was extremely optimistic. Obviously, they didn't hit summer in 1998. But yeah, and then PS2, if I had a basket and eggs, they'd all be on PS2, right? That the Final Fantasy IX would be a PlayStation 2 exclusive. And it's just like, right, wrong, right, wrong, wrong.
But I'm going to give them a mea culpa for the PlayStation 2 thing, because Final Fantasy 9, 10, and 11 were all announced at the same time in development. sort of simultaneously. And so
Sure.
Square was probably working on Final Fantasy X in some fashion, at least working on, hey, what's the PlayStation 2 version of Final Fantasy going to look like? And so, like, was Final Fantasy 9 on PlayStation 2? No. But Final Fantasy 10 came out less than a year later on
Yeah.
PlayStation 2. And so I do think
Yeah.
that there is some weight to, what is essentially them just guessing, right? Like, I don't think they had any intel on this. But, 9 would come out not long before a PlayStation 2 Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Oh man, I'm playing Final Fantasy 9 right now. Committing to a full playthrough for the first time in a long time, and it's just such a wonderful game that just like perfects everything that Square sort of discovered and created during that PlayStation era. And I just recently beat Final Fantasy X, and it undoes so much of what Final Fantasy 9, in my opinion, got right. And I'm so glad that we got that Final Fantasy on PlayStation, because it's just so good.
Yeah, it's. I'm also actually finishing up a 9 playthrough. I got close to the end game a few weeks ago, and I've been doing it with my eldest. And because I've been doing it with my eldest and not myself, just by myself, I'll skip this. I don't need to grind too much here. I don't need to play too much. I played more of the card game than I probably should have for someone who's watching me play. But it's still and now I got to the end game and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff. There's so much stuff that I, A, missed, which is fine, but B, I'm not soft locked, but I'm in rough shape going into the Kuja fight. All right, folks, it is time for us to do the thing we do. Once again, if you're not a member of FunFactor Ultra, if you've not been watching the live stream of us recording this episode, stick tight through the break. When we come back, we will review GameFan's review of Quake for the Sega Saturn, right here on FunFactor. We are having 5 stars out of 5 stars worth of fun today, and folks, if you are too, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We will read the best, funniest, kindest, and most entertaining ones on the air. But now it is time to review the review of Quake. Okay, so Aidan, we have here, this is really interesting to me. I could not figure out who the reviewer is. It's just K. Oh, I guess it's Nightmare. Okay, all right. This is the thing where I was like, who is K? And I tried to go back and look through the masthead to figure out who K was. K is Nightmare with a K, who appears to be English and hold a chainsaw. Okay, great. So that's our reviewer. Again, this developer Lobotomy, who, as we talked about in the capsule reviews, was already making a name for themselves in terms of porting cool PC games to various unsuitable consoles. And here we have Quake for the Sega Saturn. Aidan, did you even know Quake came to Saturn?
Yeah, because I've played it. I've talked before about getting an ODE, an optical disc emulator for my Saturn, and installing it. And so I've just been messing around over the past couple of years with a ton of different Saturn games, and I one of them was Quake. I didn't play a lot of it, but I played a bit of it. And like the review says, pretty neat to see Quake running on a home console. And I think what's really notable is Doom was always sort of like a flat plane first person shooter, right? And so it would compensate for height automatically. Didn't really have free mouse movement, especially back in the mid 90s. But Quake was full 3D, and so the concept of first person shooters on consoles was pretty mind blowing. We hadn't figured out first person console or first person shooter controls on consoles. That wouldn't really be sorted out, I would say, until Halo was probably the one that figured it out. And so the idea of playing a FPS with a controller was wild back then. And so when they did play well, it was even more impressive. It makes them hard to go back to because the controls are not what we expect or not what we're used to playing with now. But when you could get something figured out like Quake on the Saturn, it was good. It was neat.
All right, Aidan, do you want to review? Do you want to read Nightmares a little bit here? I think this is a really effective intro. First, they talk about having faith in Lobotomy, but from this point forward.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, trying to fit Quake into Saturn. I put it in the script.
Yeah. Okay.
So from trying to fit Quake into a Saturn.
Trying to fit Quake into a Saturn is like trying to fit Doom into SNES. And you know how that turned out. I was convinced that Lobotomy had bitten off more than they could chew this time. I was convinced that no matter how good a job they did, Quake would lose so much in the transfer that it would compromise the integrity of the experience. I was wrong. As a conversion, Quake exceeds all expectations. The game may not run quite as smooth as Duke Nukem 3D. The enemies may not be as detailed as the PC original, and some of the level layouts may have undergone minor surgery, but otherwise, this is a remarkably authentic reproduction of the PC original, right down to the ability to rocket jump and instigate monster versus monster fights. Lobotomy have succeeded against all odds in bringing the single-player Quake experience to the Saturn intact, and despite what you may have heard elsewhere, that's good news for Corridor fans.
Yeah, so that's the segment I wanted to read leading into this, and I think it's great because so many great Saturn accomplishments, Panzer Dragoon's Saga included, right? It's like against all odds. These people pulled together and did an incredible port of a iconic PC game on a console almost specifically designed not to be particularly good at it, right? And as I was saying, everything outside of the text itself, to me, is a home run for this review. But I also think Nightmare here did an outstanding job pulling us in and going like, yes, they delivered what nobody thought they'd be able to deliver.
Absolutely. And I think on top of first-person shooters on consoles just being kind of unique at the time, the Saturn didn't have a good reputation for 3D graphics. And I think that was unearned. I think it could do more and better than what people gave it credit for. And, we were talking about Panzer Dragoon Saga earlier. And so to see Quake pulled off on the Saturn in particular was, it was a bit of a flex, especially since the Saturn was basically dead in the water at this point. But being able to bring Quake to people at home on their TVs who maybe didn't have a PC that could run it is, still impressive stuff. And I think that the reviewer here, Nightmare, really accurately gives kudos to the developers or the port team at Lobotomy for what they accomplished here. I haven't played enough Quake on the Saturn to really know or compare it, against the PC version, which I played a ton of. And you always have to recognize that a console version is always going to be different and softer and compromised against, the original on PC. But, they bring up Doom as a comparison on the Super Nintendo. And, I love the Super Nintendo version of Doom, even though it's objectively not good. But I've been having a lot of fun playing the limited run, Doom SNES re-release, where they've put in a ton of work to make Doom SNES better. And it's interesting to see, and it's fun to see what they're able to kind of pull out of the original SNES hardware with, all this time and perspective and probably some extra chips on the cart. But you can still play Doom. I put the cart in my original Super Nintendo and play it on a regular TV, and it is really wild to see it running at higher stable frame rates, all these new additions. There's rumble added, so what could the best version of Quake on the Saturn look like? How much better would it be than what we got here, which was already impressive enough?
Yeah, and I don't want to jump to the end necessarily, but jumping to the end is the same thing that the capsule reviews told us, right? Quake Saturn is a technological marvel. Lobotomy have pulled out the stops to bring this baby home, and the end result is nothing short of stunning. My only real complaint, and you're going to hear this everywhere you go, is that the game has no multiplayer mode. I've been saying this since the beginning, but without Deathmatch, Quake loses 90% of its appeal. It's still a great game, but as a single-player quest, I just don't think it's a better purchase than Duke Nukem 3D. So this is fascinating to me, and the kind of shoot yourself in the foot decisions that game companies made then and now, right? And they hinted at in the capsule reviews that there was a net ready build already done, or you know, in late beta, right? And it got killed and spiked and released as a single player game. The idea that you could have been playing this multiplayer and just couldn't is astounding to me.
Yeah, but like, could they have? Right? Like,
Eh.
when there's beta stuff that, like, we've all, you know, we always see stuff pre-release builds, and then the real build comes out, and it's, you know, the texture resolution's lower, and, you know, things don't work as good in an open environment as they do in like a closed testing environment.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily buy that it was just something they chose not to do, rather than something that, like, didn't really have the legs for like a full commercial release.
Okay, Aidan, I've been Googling furiously throughout this entire site, I'm throwing site into the mix now. Episode, issue, episode, site, issue, episode. Okay, I figured it out. Thanks to our friend Molly, Nightmare is Dan Jevons, still an Englishman in LA, says his LinkedIn. He ended up, let's see, hold on. Okay. Senior writer at GameFan through 1997. Then became, and now I'm going to rewrite, I cut this opening sentence, Aidan. I have faith in lobotomy. After Duke Nukem and 3D and Power Slave, who doesn't? But I must admit, even I had doubts about their ability to port Quake to Saturn. Well, guess who became a senior game designer at Lobotomy immediately after leaving GameFan magazine?
No, really? Get out.
Yes.
Get out.
It gets better. Became a business development manager for Crave Entertainment, responsible for canvassing market for games that Crave could acquire. Worked on Tony Hawk Pro Skater for Dreamcast, Soldier of Fortune for Senior Vice President of Production for Conspiracy Entertainment, Giant Mobile. Creative Director for Union Entertainment. So this is basically business development manager, in the room pitch guy. During my time at Union, we successfully completed more than 50 talent and developer deals. Okay. Founder and CEO of Content King Studios from 2018 to 2022. Executive producer of Chain Games, working to build Chain Studios, the publishing arm of Chain Games. And then co-founder and producer of DJ2 Entertainment Incorporated, back in April of 2011, and it seems to be a side hustle until now, like until somewhere in there. Basically, his full-time job while he's also doing some of these other producing things. Creating IP Bibles for Nether, Hawken, Blacklight, Rubicon, Supernova, Sword of Souls. In 2015, Skulls of the Shogun. They produced a 5-part animated series based on that game. Created the IP Bible for an unannounced film IP for Kismet Entertainment. Sword of Souls, Sky Moons 2016 created IP Bible. And then Sonic the Hedgehog feature film 2020 co-producer, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 feature film 2022 co-producer, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 feature film TBD co-producer with original films Sega and Paramount. Original duties included creating or overseeing creation of all original content at DJ2, transmedia materials, So yeah, has been working on all of the stuff that's not actually the movies for the Sonic movies, the transmedia, like promotions, campaigns, etc. All this original media content, narrative designs, game designs. So I'm like, wow, okay, so this is Nightmare immediately after this review, and actually it says 1997 at Lobotomy. So he was probably already at lobotomy by the time this review hit the shelves.
He carried this issue to his like the proof of this issue to his job interview, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like his draft for this review was his job app for lobotomy.
Totally.
We've seen reviewers ultimately or quickly linked to the games they ended up reviewing. I've never seen this before. This is wild to me.
Yeah, that's a direct jump for sure. But I mean, like, this is also where, though, the capsule reviews come in handy, because we also see, like, Nightmare's work on here, but also those capsule reviews kind of backing up Nightmare's scores, right? So it's not like, super egregious to have made that jump, but it is kind of interesting. Something also interesting.
And as you put, we talked about with these GameFan reviews don't have scores, right? The big splashy editorial reviews, ones, they don't get the scores.
Yeah. Just digging into like this Quake version or Saturn version of Quake, what's interesting is Lobotomy actually used their own game engine rather than like porting over using what Quake was running, the Quake engine. Created by Carmack and them at id. They used the same engine that they used for Power Slave and Duke Nukem 3D on the Saturn. Just incorporating the 3D elements into the engine rather than the sprite-based stuff used in Power Slave and Duke Nukem 3D, which is interesting. Probably also made them, like a good candidate because they had that strong understanding of how to make 3D games work on the Saturn rather than trying to squeeze the existing version into the console. Which I always think is interesting. Again, we talked about Doom for the SNES on an earlier episode, and it's another one that was, like when you're bringing it to consoles, you basically have to remake and figure out how to remake a game on completely different architecture. There was also a Nintendo 64 version of Quake, which was
yes
decent, I think. Though I have never actually played that one.
All right, well, Aidan, we've been going on for a little bit. I just before we review the review, I have to close this out. Still, if you have the money for both, I do recommend you check it out. Lobotomy have single-handedly turned the Saturn from a, quote, corridor-free zone into a, quote, corridor-rich environment. If I were Sega, I'd be doing everything in my power right now to keep Lobotomy very, very happy. Co-signed, a guy who was working for Lobotomy by the time this issue hit the sold. Oh, my gosh. It's not. It doesn't read. Before I googled this, that didn't come off as out of place to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That didn't come off as like no. And this is not an outlier review. This is not like obviously getting this game, a full 3D heavy game that was a boundary pushing first person shooter on PC not long before its release, like onto the Sega Saturn, it is an achievement.
Yeah.
It is like wow. But also it changes everything once you know that detail about what this guy then went and did.
Definitely puts things into perspective for sure. Because like I am looking at a roundup of reviews for the Saturn version, and GameFan gave it a like what amounts to a 275 out of 300. So whatever that is, it's almost that's 9.75 out of 10 or whatever. But then like GameSpot gave the Saturn version 6.4 out of 10. Next Generation gave 3 out of 5, so 6 out of 10. What else we have? 6.5 out of 10 from EGM as well, 3.5 out of 5 from All Game. I'm just pulling these from Wikipedia. And GameFan was sort of the standout here. They were definitely above and beyond. But
maybe I was wrong when I said it was an outlier review. Okay, all right. Yeah. No, that's
So it's interesting. And now I'm eager to go play the Nintendo 64 and Saturn versions of Quake and kind of see how, from that perspective, they hold up. I don't know what to give this one, Ty.
I don't know either, because I think as a whole piece by the team, again, pan back out. Look at this awesome 2-page spread.
Beautiful.
None of the layout problems that sometimes come with them being ambitious. Yeah. All of the benefits that come with them being ambitious.
Yeah.
Tons of screenshots. As I was saying while you were on break a minute ago, the layout is great. The text actually does flow well. It doesn't run into each other. It doesn't run into the scene. It doesn't do any of that stuff. good captions without the whole review being in the captions, and I think it covers all the bases. It's just, once again, wild to then turn back and go, okay, wait a minute, this guy was singing this team's praises and then was on this team immediately afterward.
Yeah. But you know what? I'm looking at quotes from a lot of other contemporaneous reviews of that version, and like a lot of the knocks are similar. Like EGM, Craig Kujawa for EGM said, it's not a great one-player game, gained notoriety for its, multiplayer. Suchi X said, without multiplayer, I'd pass. Rich Ledbetter from Sega Saturn magazine, who is now runs our favorite show, Digital Foundry,
Yes.
gave the port a 92%, acknowledging, basically saying, like, quote, here's a quote, "Look, it's Quake on the Saturn. The machine has no right to be doing this." In Sega Saturn magazine, basically saying, like, like, not blowing smoke up the Saturn's ass, right? But saying, like, this game should not be able to run on this console in the magazine dedicated to that console. And so, like, we are kind of seeing patterns in the critical feedback, and the scores may be changing. But, somebody like Rich, who I trust now about console conversions and understanding the intricacies of something like Quake running on a inferior console, for him to say, like, this shouldn't be happening, lines up with what Nightmare's saying in this review as well. And so when you see patterns within the text of the reviews, I would say that backs up the idea that, there weren't any shenanigans going on here necessarily, even though there's, the look isn't great.
Yeah. So I think for me, getting this review from future co-producer of all 3 Sonic the Hedgehog movies, and I was stuttering a little bit earlier because I saw he's listed as a co-producer on IMDb, and then I was reading his LinkedIn, and I was trying to make sure I didn't overstate what his role on the movies was, because I was searching in real time trying to figure out what his role in the movies is, but he is credited as a co-producer. I think this is a fantastic review overall. What you're saying about the scores and the enthusiasm, maybe being a little bit overstated compared to other magazines, but the knocks on this, and I'm sure some magazines just went, look, I'm not giving this higher than a 6 just because it has no net play, right? Or something along those lines, whether that's explicitly stated in the review or not. So yeah, for me, I want to give this kind of a comparable score. I think I want to give it like a 83 nails in the nail gun.
I think that's maybe a little low. I like how honest Nightmare was, saying, like, hey, I came into this thinking this was going to be a nightmare, but it's great. That's so fair. I think 83 is a little low. I'm going to go with an 84. Feels a little more right to me, I think.
In true GameFan fashion.
Yeah. You got to use that 100-point scale.
We're either 40 points apart or we're 1 point apart. We can do that.
Exactly.
All right, folks. Well, did we get it right? Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or in the comments on YouTube or on Spotify, wherever you are listening to us. The best, funniest, kindest, and most insightful will get read on the air in our letters section. And hey, there wasn't a letters section today, guys, because we didn't have any new reviews, new comments. We did have a couple of new subscribers over the holidays. It was super cool. New members joining the Ultra Lounge and saying, hey, I got some Christmas money, wanted to subscribe to you guys, wanted to be there for some of these recordings, want to do that. That is awesome. We feel super excited when you guys join it, because that is what makes this possible for us to do, and walking through game history and talking about game present together and with you. It is fantastic. Please, again, if you're listening, consider becoming a member. Just go to funfactorpod.com. You cannot miss the sign up widget on the homepage, or just shout us out on Blue Sky, YouTube, TikTok at FunFactorPod. Special thanks go, as always, to Millennium Falck for our amazing original music. Check out his work at millenniumfalck.com. And unlike these old magazines, you won't have to wait a whole month for your next installment. We drop new episodes every 2 weeks. So just go to funfactorpod.com, follow our show on your podcatcher of choice, and I promise you and we will have a maximum score in Fun Factor.
my roadcaster's not playing. Oh, wait. That's
Oh.
That's not right. Oh my gosh.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
In any case, pretend that was our interstitial music. We'll put it in the VOD version. Yeah, Stewie, like GameFan shown, I think it has the it just has the energy of that fan space, right? Where it, you know, it could be printed in a big magazine. It wasn't a small home printed fanzine where you were still limited on, you know, column height and all that kind of stuff because you could only afford to print, you know, back-to-back pages or whatever. But GameFan, like going back, GameFan reminds me the most of like the online blogging scene that especially existed, say, 15 years ago, but still exists now and coming through newsletters where you have people who, you know, they're not writing in spaces to make money necessarily, not because they don't want to, but because you just can't. And so you see that space where people have the ability to just sprawl out and be more exploratory in their writing. And I really do appreciate that sort of stuff, as much as I also recognize the craft of writing something that's, you know, shorter and tighter along the way.
So yeah, it's funny. So yeah, they also have a chat is going wild as I'm flipping through pages here. I'm doing it the hard way, right? Anime fan. So now we're getting like anime coverage. Oh no. Okay, sure. So all right, cool. Golden Boy. Yeah, Golden Boy. I was looking at this. I never saw Golden Boy. I loved this beginning though. Because of course there's just a bunch of cheesecake shots and stuff and it's like truth be told, truth be told, initially I wasn't that fond of Golden Boy, leaning more towards fantasy and serious drama for my anime fix. The kooky antics of an oversexed ex-law student riding his mountain bike from job to job in search of adventure and sex just didn't do it for me initially. I have come, however, to quite enjoy this series, both for its bold humor and excellent portrayal of curious youth. A better dubbed anime, Kentaro is played perfectly by ADV graphic artist Douglas Smith on a sugar high. True story. And the sound quality is excellent throughout. Oh my gosh. Mostly though in episodes 4 and 5 you'll get more of what GB is famous for. Beautiful babes and big boobs along with great one-liners you'll want to use over and over. For instance, when Kentaro spots a sexy biker, he exclaims, "Baby, my kickstand is up," or "I wish I was a motorcycle seat." Unbelievable. Great stuff here in GameFan in December 1997. Just one-liners you'll use over and over in real life all the time. Appropriate for all audiences and situations. Enjoyable in mixed company. People will think you're the life of the party if you quote these anime one-liners. So yeah, Aiden's once again been gaming and potting too hard, blowing the circuit breaker on his garage here.
Yeah, I can't figure out why it keeps going, but I'm back, hopefully.
All right, cool. I've been scrolling back the slow manual way rather than jump to the actual page while I'm killing time, and now I've lost the actual page, so I have to do it manually. So there's Burning Rangers. This thing here, oh my gosh, the video game control glove, the PlayStation Power Glove. There's a thing like this called the Naya that's come out. It was like a kickstarted keyboard thing that looks like this. And I've been like, oh man, I wanted that so bad. Okay, here we go. All right, the actual thing. Hold on a minute. I got to record the outro and then back intro.